Dr. Tonya is an outstanding young lady that has had a brilliant educational career. She started out at Northeastern Junior College in Sterling, Colorado. She went on to Texas Tech University to get a BS in Animal Science in 2001. She completed her PhD at Texas A&M University with a certificate in business and her PhD in animal breeding. Dr. Amon is a very accomplished lady. She is involved heavily in genetics and genetic research. Her professional career has scoped things like the National Center of Beef Excellence in Kansas City, Missouri, which is in her present position. She's a former employee of Angus Genetics, Inc., which is a division of the American Angus Association, and she's an outstanding research scientist. So, ladies and gentlemen, help me give a big welcome to Dr. Tonya Amon.
Thank you. I'm going to check out the mic here. Can everybody hear me okay? Volume good? All right, awesome. It's so great to be here, and thank you guys for being so flexible with my travel debacle yesterday. Switching the schedule around and everything. You don't have to twist my arm too hard to get me to come back to Texas. It's fun to see Dr. Pond here. He was the department head at Texas Tech when I was in school there. And then I walked in the door, and the first person I ran into was Jimmy Good, who I've had many conversations with when I worked for the Angus Association. So the talk today will be a little bit different. Any of you that may have heard me speak before, normally it's about EPDs or indexes or genomic testing or things like that. And so today they asked me to talk about one of the other tools that is in your toolbox for genetic improvement, and that's crossbreeding. And so it's fun to get to talk about something a little different for me. I chuckled when Temple said she had to keep talking about some of the same things over and over, and I feel like I've been talking about EPDs over and over and over. And so it's a good change of pace today. So I'm going to dive right into it because my time's pretty short today. So I want you guys to take a minute and think about the traits, the genetic traits in your cattle that impact your profitability. Think about those traits, okay? And you can kind of lump them into broad categories. What of those traits do you think have the highest impact on the profitability in your cattle operations? The biggest impact, what group of traits? Yeah, I'm hearing fertility, reproduction, things like that, exactly. And that's usually what I hear. Repro is the number one thing that impacts profitability, okay? Of course, you got to have some production in those cattle. We still get paid on weight, right? And ever more these days, we get premiums for high-quality beef that seem to grow all the time, right? So you got to think about your product. So there's a lot of things that you have to think about in terms of your bottom line that impacts your profitability in your operations. But typically, number one is this, number two is this, and then never forget that we do have a product that we need to market to our consumers as well, okay? So when you go to design your breeding program, your optimum breeding program, and I'm guessing there's some seed stock producers in the room, and there's probably some commercial folks in the room, and this is more of a commercially focused talk today, all right? But there are some genetic factors that you need to keep in mind. First of all, the cattle you're producing. You have to know where they're going to be marketed. You need to have a breeding plan so that the cattle that you produce hit the target market and fit that market. So the cattle produced and their traits and their performance are important. Hybrid vigor is very important, and I'm going to spend most of my time talking to you about that today and hopefully influence and persuade you that that's an important thing to keep in mind. And then there's a way to design your breeding programs that make sense. Having cows that fit your environment and are well suited to it and are reproductively sound and all of those things, and then using bulls and your sire selection to make sure you hit the target for number one, those calves that you're going to produce and ultimately sell, right? So you've got two tools as breeders that you can use to try to make all of those things happen. One of them is crossbreeding. okay? Taking advantage of hybrid vigor and breed complementarity. And then yesterday, and where I usually do my talks, talking about selection. When you go to choose your bulls, what tools do you have to do that? We've got EPDs and genomics and all of those things, and that's important. And I hope you all learned something when Dr. Lallman gave his talk about EPDs yesterday. I'm going to forget about that today, and that doesn't mean I don't think it's important. I think it is. But I've been asked to primarily focus on this part right here, okay? So we're going to dive off into that now. Remember that list of traits that we just talked about? We said reproduction impacted your profitability the most, on down to the profit traits. Here are the two tools that you have. You've got crossbreeding at your disposal and also selection, so using EPDs to make your bull selection and things like that, okay? Turns out those reproductive traits are very, very highly influenced by crossbreeding, the thing that we're going to talk about today, all right? You can make a bit of genetic improvement through selection, through using things like the heifer pregnancy EPD and some things like that, but you make a lot quicker progress using this for the reproductive traits. Okay, product traits, you're not going to influence your mature size, your marbling, your ribeye size much with crossbreeding, a little bit, but it's minuscule. The way you improve those the most quickly are through your bull selection, using EPDs and things like that to choose the animals that have the high carcass EPDs, that have the marbling that you want, that have the ribeye EPDs that you desire. That's how you improve the product traits the most, okay? So, let's talk about hybrid vigor. What is it? Any ideas? It's one of the benefits of crossbreeding for sure. So hybrid vigor, a lot of times you want to say it's just the increased performance of crossbred animals over purebred animals, and that's not exactly right. It's the increased performance of crossbred animals over the average of the two pure breeds. All right, so let me give you an example here. Let's say that you have breed A, and I'm not going to name any names because I want to make anybody angry, but their average weaning weight is 500 pounds. And then you have breed B, and the average weaning weight for the animals in that population is 700 pounds. Okay, so if it was just average, when you bred those two together, what would we get for our average weaning weights? 600. Well, with hybrid vigor, you get 620. Okay, so it's that little kick over the average of what you'd expect. All right? So here's the short version. The cliff notes, so then you can go to sleep after this if you can't keep your eyes open anymore. I'm kidding. Okay, it's most important for survival and reproductive traits, like I just mentioned to you. Okay, secondly, it tends to be higher, so that little kick, that 720 or 730 or whatever it is over 600, tends to be bigger the more different the breeds involved are. So you guys in this part of the world are super lucky because you get to take advantage of some of the Indicus breeds and American breeds, and boy, there is a lot of hybrid vigor there. It's actually two species, right? Indicus and Taurus, so there's a lot of hybrid vigor there. There will be a bit of hybrid vigor between just the English breeds like Angus and Hereford, right? There'd be a bit of hybrid vigor there, certainly. Even within families within a breed, there'll be a bit, okay? There's more hybrid vigor if you do Angus and Charolais, because they're more genetically different, right? So you get more hybrid vigor the more genetically different the animals are that are involved, okay? Third, it tends to be proportional to the degree of heterozygosity. And I'm sorry for throwing out a genetics word, and I hope none of you are having bad flashbacks to your genetics class, all right? But heterozygosity just means if we are at a gene locus and an animal inherits the same thing, it's AA. That's homozygous. If the animal were to inherit opposite things from the parent, like AB, that's heterozygous. So the more places you have AB, AB, AB instead of AA, 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 the more hybrid vigor that you get. That just means the first generation of a cross of two different breeds is where you're going to have the most hybrid vigor. There'll be some, if you continue, with F2s, or if you use some of like the American breeds that would be what we'd call composite breeds. There's still some there, just not as much as there is on that first cross, okay? And this is the one that I keep emphasizing over and over and over again. It's especially important for female productivity. I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about that today, okay? give you some high notes on how it impacts your profitability. First of all, weaning weight per cow exposed is increased by 20% through the use of crossbreeding, both direct and maternal. Okay, longevity. How important is longevity in your cow herd and decreasing your replacement rate? That's pretty important. Costs a lot of money to retain heifers and develop those heifers or go purchase them, right? So we would like to maintain those cows in your herd a long time. Increased by 16% through the use of crossbreeding. Here's what we're talking about again, feedlot performance. There's a bit, it helps. Okay, those crossbred cattle perform well in the yard, and there's some hybrid vigor, some heterosis advantage there. And then we get down to carcass composition. Okay, you're going to do a lot better job of improving that, improving your marbling, your ribeye scores, things like that, with just the use of EPDs. But there is a bit of hybrid vigor there, just not as much. Okay, let's talk about the females. If you have crossbred females, it impacts those females themselves in the way they perform as cows on your ranch. First of all, they tend to reach puberty earlier. How many of you think that's important? Okay, yeah, they get bred earlier, they calve earlier, they have more time to recover before they have to be bred back again, tend to stick around a little bit longer, right? Okay, and goes right along with their postpartum anestrus. They recover quicker after they have that calf, get bred back quicker. Okay, longevity we mentioned, they stick around longer in your herd as a crossbred cow. And most other measures of fertility. So this is what we call direct hybrid vigor. This is a benefit to the female herself because she is crossbred. Okay? There's another benefit to crossbred females, and it's what we call maternal hybrid vigor. And that's a benefit to their calf because they are raised by a crossbred cow. And they're additive. So you get all this benefit of having a crossbred dam, and then her calf benefits just because mama was a crossbred instead of a purebred. Okay? Calves that are born to crossbred dams survive better, higher survivability to weaning. We saw a bit of increase in growth, so they'll have slightly higher weaning weights as well. Okay? And this is referred to as maternal hybrid vigor. You get to add that, they are completely additive to any benefit that that calf might have to being crossbred itself. Okay, so if you have, let's say, some black baldy females come back with a Charolais bull, you get all of the direct hybrid vigor and the benefit to the females of their longevity within the herd, of their earlier rate of puberty, of their return to estrus, and then the fact that those calves are raised by those crossbred cows means that they're going to survive better, they're going to grow better, things of that nature. Okay? So when we compare straight breeding systems, that just means if you're using the same breed bull on the same breed cow, okay, over half of the advantage of crossbreeding systems comes from the use of crossbred females. Okay, so there's a lot of talk about crossbred bulls and things like that, but most of the benefit to crossbreeding comes in the form of using crossbred females. Okay, a lot of the times we want to talk in terms of weights and measures and marbling scores and things like that, but can we actually evaluate the benefit of hybrid vigor to financial terms? And so I've cited some things. If any of you want to go on Google Scholar and find these papers, you're welcome to do that, but I've taken the cliff notes for you and kind of summarized them here. Okay, the use of crossbred cows decreased lifetime input cost per unit of output by 6%. So influencing the cost side of your profit equation. Costs are decreased by 6%. Okay? If you also produced crossbred calves, okay, add 6% more to that. So your input costs are going down, both on the female side and through producing crossbred calves. Okay, if you produce crossbred calves and have crossbred cows, you increase your total income by 15%. So we're decreasing the cost side of the profit equation, increasing the income side by 15%. So it should be no surprise to you that net profit was about, the benefit for using crossbred cows is about $70 per cow per year. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, the other benefit of crossbreeding is that you get to make use of what we call breed complementarity. So we know there are breeds that excel or are known more for some of the female traits, okay? And we know there are breeds that excel and are known more for some of those terminal, carcass, and growth type traits. And the use of crossbreeding allows you then to make use and combine those breeds in a way that's most optimal for your operation and also for the target you're trying to hit when you market your calves. That's the second benefit, much shorter benefit to explain of crossbreeding. Two main things. You get to take advantage of hybrid vigor, both direct and maternal, and you get to take advantage of breed complementarity as well. Okay? So remember, you have two tools in your toolbox. You've got crossbreeding, which I've talked about pretty briefly today, primarily focusing on the benefits of using a crossbred cow. And then also, I hope you all were here, and if you have questions, there's plenty of people in the room today that can help you on, if you have questions about EPDs and that selection process and using indexes and things like that. You've got those two tools in your toolbox. I hope you make use of both of them in order to influence the profitability of your farms and ranches. Okay? And the mind can't absorb what the butt can't endure, so I'm keeping it short for you today, okay? Commercial cattlemen must practice crossbreeding and use smart selection in order to have the most economic benefit to your ranch. That's it. I would be happy to take a couple of quick questions probably, if you have any. Or I will be around for a bit if any of you want to chat about things that are more detailed afterwards. Yes?
We've been using Charolais cows and Angus bulls, and we've gotten now just down to where we're mainly cross cows left.
Yep.
We don't have many of the originals left. How do you start? Do you go back then to more Charolais to keep that Charolais?
Yeah, so she's asking an interesting question, and this is always one of the main points the main things that you need to keep in mind when you design your breeding program is if you were going to use a crossbred female, where are they going to come from? Okay, are you going to raise them? Are you going to buy them? If you're going to raise them, then you have to have the two pure breeds, so that's a totally separate operation for you, creating your own females over here. Do you have the land resources? Do you have the hand resources to be able to maintain that? And so you're asking the decades-old question about crossbreeding, and that's just where do your crossbred females come from? Buy or replace? And there's been tons of papers, and the economic results come out both ways on that. So you just have to kind of know what's best for and where you can find those things in your area.
We have the cows.
Yep.
We've kept our cows because we only had 8 to start with, so it's not have to worry too much. But when do you start going back toward Charolais is my question.
Oh, okay. So they primarily have, it sounds like some crossbred cows that are Angus Charolais cross now, and she's wondering when do they start bringing back in one of those other breeds. And you do have to keep in mind at some point, if you have bulls that start to be related to your females, that's a really good time to go back and probably start introducing some other genetics into your operation.
So, Dr. Amon, do I remember right? Now, bear in mind, I took these courses back in the late 70s,
Yes.
early 80s.
Was Dr. Sanders your
Dr.
teacher?
Sanders was my professor at A&M.
Dr. Sanders was mine too, yes.
Do I remember right that you maximize heterosis or hybrid vigor at the F2 cross? Is that
So,
right?
partially. You maximize direct hybrid vigor in the F1. Okay? In that F1 generation, you got a purebred female. So there's no hybrid vigor in a purebred female. F1 females, then, if you take those F1s, keep them as your heifers, that's when you maximize your maternal hybrid vigor. And then what happens to the direct hybrid vigor depends on what bull you bring back. Yep.
So when I used to work in the Brangus business down in central Texas, they thought an F1 was a tiger stripe Hereford cross. It is a black baldy, a Hereford Angus cross. Is that an F1? Yeah, it is. So, we got to think about all that as we breed our cattle and use these tools. One more question. Anybody have one more question? David Cook.
Oh, docility EPD is what you're asking about. Yes.
I've had, everybody else has had bulls that will charge you on the horse and everything.
Yeah, well, and so this is getting into some of what Temple discussed. So I'll explain docility EPD and what it represents. A higher docility EPD means a higher chance of a temperament score of 1, which is docile. Okay, so a higher chance of a more desirable docility. Bigger is better, just like calving ease. Okay, that's what the docility EPD stands for. Now, if in your herd you don't have any issues with docility, in other words, you don't have any crazy cattle, selecting for more isn't going to get you anywhere. So there's a certain point where the EPD doesn't, it's like selecting for more calving ease when you're not pulling any calves. You can't get more, you can just start getting some little bitty calves. Okay, so that's what the docility EPD means. Now remember, and I hear stories about this all the time, well, that bull has a high score or a high docility EPD, but he's crazy. Well, environment still matters. How that animal was treated still plays a role in how they themselves act. What the EPD tells you is he has the genetic pieces to pass on to his offspring that would allow them to express a better temperament. That doesn't mean they will if you don't listen to what Dr. Grandin told you about proper handling procedures and some of these things. They can still end up crazy. Okay, does that help? Okay.
Okay, let's give, first of all, Corteva Agri-Sciences, that's my friend Jody Stockett, was the corporate sponsor for Dr. Amon's talk. And help me thank Corteva and Dr. Amon for our great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you.